Hello everyone, welcome to myself, Max McGillivray from Beanstalk. Great to catch up with Craig again. Craig, say hello to everyone.
Hi everyone.
So this is our second outing of this broadcast where Craig and I are really interested to have a discussion about the international agribusiness, agriculture and fresh produce sectors on an investment basis. And Craig, if you remember on our first outing, I gave you the big intro, and I absolutely murdered your company name. And I'm getting such a reputation for murdering company names and also individuals' names. I've got a great broadcast coming up next week with Global Women Fresh. We're across 3-4 continents, and they've got 3-4 great speakers. But Craig, you should see the list of names. I can't get anywhere near pronouncing them, so I'll sort of just give it up on that basis. So I thought today, rather than me doing the big rah-rah on yourself, Craig, introduce you and introduce your business, please.
I thought you did a good job last time, except you used the word expert quite liberally. I've had, I think, 25 years as a professional career, starting off in engineering and then into management consulting, private equity, and then most recently the CEO of a vertically integrated subtropical fresh produce business with operations in South Africa and across Europe, sourcing produce from around the world. Then subsequently I set up a advisory company focusing on agriculture investing and work with clients, either business owners, investors, institutional fund managers, family offices, and at times government agencies, navigating opportunities for investing and long-term sustainable growth in the ag sector, with a real focus on permanent crops.
And Craig, the name of your business, please, and the meaning of it. I love the meaning of it.
It's Persea Advisors, and Persea is an evergreen or genus of an evergreen tree. So deep-rooted, slow-growing, stable,
fantastic,
and evergreen.
And
one famous subspecies of the genus Persea is Persea americana, which is the avocado. So sort of doing the advisory work and also working on establishing a fund for investing primarily in permanent high-value crops in sub-Saharan Africa.
And this is why I was really keen for everyone to understand a bit more about Craig, because Craig, if it's okay to say, you're completely biased towards the joys of Africa, whether that be the wildlife aspect, and you very kindly share some of the photos that you see of the amazing wildlife close to you, but also the investment opportunities in Africa. And I find it fascinating with the funds that we work with, the very, as we discussed in the last broadcast, we learned so much from Craig, especially this Craig. The main takeaway I took from our last broadcast was that in times of a recession, a lot of funds look to come to agribusinesses globally because it's a safe haven. And we're absolutely seeing this with this recession / pandemic that we're all going through. But there's this what's the best word? This concern about Africa, about investing in Africa, because I think some people have got the wrong idea about it, that they see it as tainted, as God forbid, corrupted. But then you look at some of the businesses and some of the activities that Craig has been involved in, it could be further from the truth. But you need to meet and you need to speak to Craig and people like Craig and businesses that have been involved in this sector to get a better understanding. So that's why we were very keen to get Craig on. And Craig, just to say, the last broadcast that we did, I didn't tell you, but I just had my COVID jab the day before. So when we were broadcasting, I was a bit all over the place, and it turned out I was having the standard side effects from the jab. And then what was the other two things I was going to mention to you? We've got two peculiarities in the UK. You mentioned about evergreen. If there's two investments that you want to get involved in the short term in the UK, it's garden gnomes and jacuzzis. What do I mean by that? Well, we all knew about the Suez Canal crisis. When was that, Craig? About 2 weeks ago now, and that vessel that was held up, it's still been held within the Suez Canal because it's got $1 billion US fine to pay until the Egyptians, the authority, release it. And on that container ship that's holding something like 18,000 containers, you wouldn't believe it, there's 5 containers of gnomes destined for the UK. And so now you can't buy any gnomes in the UK for love or money. So there's a theft of gnomes happening in the UK and selling of them on the black market. And likewise, jacuzzis. Where I live in Suffolk in England, we had a recent report of a family with a large garden. They saw a drone going overhead one evening. Didn't think too much of it, and then 2 days on, they went to the bottom of their garden and found that their jacuzzi had been stolen. So they had a big 8-seater jacuzzi, and it turned out that whoever it was had nicked a local tractor from a farmer, drained this jacuzzi, dragged the jacuzzi out through the garden across 2 fields, and loaded it on a lorry. So whatever Craig says about investing in agribusiness, especially in Africa, dismiss it in the short term, go long on gnomes and go long on jacuzzis within the UK. That's where the market is. But let's get back to where Craig is today. What Craig and our catch-up calls was looking to. Craig, you wanted to find the different ag sector investment verticals available. Shall I let you run with it, and because we want to learn from you and see where we go? Shall I let you have the floor?
Yeah, sure. I think after the last webinar or episode, quite a few approaches around sort of which sectors of ag should one consider investing in. I often get people asking, I'm keen to invest in ag. I get the investment proposition of ag as an attractive asset class, all the underpins of that population growth, changing diets, low volatility in returns over a long time, hedge against inflation, etc., etc. But what crop should I invest in, and how do I go about it? But I thought today would be quite useful to sort of expand on the ag investing landscape, and that it is so much more than just actual primary production. And a growing ag sector provides multiple investment opportunities from tree to shelf, along with multiple direct and indirect support services. So I thought, let's make an attempt to deconstruct the ag investing landscape in this episode, and through that highlight that there's so many more opportunities in ag investing than just primary production. Bearing in mind that I'm no expert on this, I'm not an expert on the whole ecosystem. I understand the base fundamentals, but I'm sure there's going to be some agri-economists that might take me to task. So I'm hopefully guided on my sort of previous experience as a chief executive of a vertically integrated fresh produce business, plus investing in my own personal capacity and doing quite a lot of work in other sectors. So let's dive in. So I think what I find there's multiple definitions of primary ag asset classes, and sort of I've tried to sort of come up with my own that makes sense to me. So I talk about the commodity row crops. These are crops planted and harvested annually, include the grains and oil seeds, corn, soybeans, wheat, sugarcane, etc. The typically row crop investments produce relatively stable income over a long period, since planting decisions can be sort of made annually. It's an annualized crop, so if the markets turn, you can actually look at alternatives and plant those annually. And then you've got a number of these row crops, these bulk row crops that play a role for alternative fuels.
Cool. Yeah.
So given their low risk profile compared to permanent crops, row crops often serve as a core in a diversified portfolio. So that's one vertical, one asset class, commodity row crops. Second one, high intensity, fast moving crops. This is my own definition. And these are crops that typically have one or multiple harvests per year, highly intensive in terms of labor and time, in terms of the window for harvesting and the window to market. So it's fast moving. And these are typically your vegetables, herbs, flowers, etc., etc. Then you've got the third vertical, permanent crops. And they're permanent crops, typically trees, bushes, and vines, but have a long lifespan, anywhere up to 25, 30 years or more. And there we talk about sort of table grapes, tree nuts, citrus, palm fruit, avocados, mango. The list is endless. They mature 3 to 7 years after planting, and so there's quite a long lag between your investment, the planting, and the realization of returns. And typically these crops deliver much higher sort of income returns than row crops, but they also experience higher volatility on a year-to-year basis. The fourth vertical that I consider are the specialty or speciality crops. These are crops that, by their very definition, are unique in their IP, processing, value-adding, use, and marketing. So crops grown for special purposes, be they for medicinal use, essential oils, maybe for R&D, for meats, protein substitution, etc. It's quite an interesting space, but you're very specialized. And these are your typical crop verticals, and then you get into the other ag investment asset classes of livestock, which would be your beef, chicken.
Craig, can I just jump in? It's just interesting on the speciality one. I'm aware that the likes of Unilever and Nestle have got scouts out in the likes of West Africa looking for speciality crops and different nut varieties, trying to create something that's going to be unique in the market. So I suppose they're big enough to be able to invest in, let's call it that R&D, that they think there's going to be another future with other product lines down that speciality crop side, just to say.
Yeah, and I mean, you get the medicinal side of things are really interesting. That's where you get sort of armies of researchers in the Amazon basin looking for these unique endemic plant species or plant alkaloids for variety of uses. So very specialized. And then you get into the other sector, the verticals, livestock, timber, fisheries, aquaculture. Those are the other four. And then you can arguably add game farm to it, where people farm wildlife for conservation purposes, but also for value add, because breeding of sort of genetic traits of bighorn buffalo, etc. And that was quite an interesting. It's been quite an interesting period of the last 10 years of a lot of money being invested in that. But I think the music may have stopped.
And Craig, just on that side, we're seeing the same thing within the UK. We're aware of an estate that's upwards of, I've got to go to acres, 5,000 acres plus, and the owner who made his money in business is looking to create that estate into a wilderness estate in the UK. And there are examples of that, and someone might be able to go online and remind me. There are examples of that down in, I think it's Sussex in the south of the UK. So we're also seeing those wilderness farms, estates being created in the UK.
Yeah, so I mean, they're your 8, or what I define as the 8 sectors. I'm sure specialists or economists will correct me on it, but they make sense to me. And then you've got, so we won't get onto the animal side of things, well, because there's a fresh produce show, we'll focus on the first four: bulk row crops, high intensity, fast moving crops, permanent crops, and specialty crops. But yeah, getting back to the start of the discussion is, so people approach me and say, so where, which crop should I invest in? And I'm like, okay, well, let's try and unpack the whole sector, all the support pieces of each vertical. And I have developed a sort of a slide, which I'm going to try and share. And if it doesn't work, then I'll just kick it out.
Yeah, Craig and I had a go in this earlier. Craig, if you haven't already picked up, I'm sorry, I should have introduced this in beautiful South Africa. And I'm in the UK, and sometimes we have a bit of a transmission problem. We were blaming the Russians earlier, but I'm sure it wasn't. It isn't them. And Craig, it's live and not flashing. Well done.
Okay, excellent. Okay. So yeah, I mean, there's sort of a direct sector or subsector, which is obviously farmland. This is investing in the primary production and underlying assets. Land could be leased or owned, infrastructure, and a biological asset. This is obviously a large investment, and when people say to me, what crop should I invest in? They're just thinking of the farmland. But let's talk about these other sort of direct sectors, opportunities, and that is investing in the development of cultivar, IP, seed, rootstocks, varietals, and associated land infrastructure. Now, these are the nurseries, cultivar, IP. Processing, investing in the sorting, packing operation as an extension of the farm assets, or in a cooperative, or as an independent aggregator. You'll find in the processing side, a farm with large scale might have their own processing unit, a pack house, sorting operation. But if you're subscale, you'll be leaning on an independent processing operation, which might aggregate from a number of farms. Then you've got the value adding space, and that's endless, but investing in the capacity for value addition to the base products. And these are multiple channels. Just think about avocado, for instance. You farm it, you'll process it, sort and pack it, and the class 1 gets sent off to its destinations, and there it might go through a value adding of ripening so that it can be ready to eat in the supermarket. But there's other value adding elements, production of avocado oil, guacamole, take tree nuts, almonds, for example. You're having, go to the supermarket, get your almond snap pack, and you're having an almond, but 20% of almonds are actually sold as snacks. 80% goes into food services. And that could be for confectionery purposes, biscuits, and ice creams and chocolates. And a whole lot goes into production of almond milk. So that's what I'm talking about, the value adding, grapes into wine, so to speak. But then investing in the distribution or marketing, trading, and distribution of the products, that's nationally and internationally. So those are the core sort of direct other sort of sub-asset classes in these vertical sectors. Then, and if we look at that, there's that's where you traditionally think of the places to invest. But with a growing ag sector, there's so many other support sectors that play a role. And let's just talk about those. Cultural support services. So these are providers of outsourced ag services to subscale farming operations and even large operations. That could be harvesting, pest management, pruning, et cetera, et cetera. You see these sort of outsource support service companies in in places with high sort of labor costs. You know, a farm in California might be a 40-hectare avocado farm or lemon farm, and the permanent staff in there might be, you know, 4 or 5 people, and they outsource sort of harvesting, pest management, pruning, to independent operators that come in, and they will provide those services to a whole range of, you know, farms in the area. So a great opportunity. And I think in Africa in time, I think there's sort of lots of opportunities in that to provide support services to smallholder farmers to really improve the yield and quality. Inputs. So various inputs required for nutrition, pest management across all these asset classes. So these will typically be your chemicals, fertilizer, seeds, etc. Typically, your large multinational companies sort of own that space, but there's massive opportunities for setting up distribution operations in countries that don't have those yet. Logistics and warehousing, road, air, and sea freight, plus, you know, the warehouse and bulk storage across the value chain. Then there's the agri equipment and services. You starting a farm, you need vehicles, spray equipment, processing equipment, HVAC for, you know, cold rooms, heating, irrigation systems, sensors, bins, bulk handling. You know, it's just endless. And then there's obviously the packaging, various produce dependent. But, you know, those, you know, often when you talk about agri, you know, the contribution of agriculture to a country's GDP is primarily measured on its production, and what is not sort of maybe fully respected is the contribution, the sort of the additionality that you get out of ag's contribution. And that's, I think the economists call them linkages, backward and forward linkages. Yep. And this is where this is all happening. So a country that is coming from a low base of agricultural development, but there's, you know, you can get that growth going. There's so many sectors that start to sprout. It's like a flywheel gets going. And these are these sort of opportunities. So I think, you know, getting back to the Africa theme, you know, countries that have, you know, that have the land and the water, they're coming from a low base. These pioneers going in there to go and develop new farms. In time, a whole lot of opportunities that start to evolve for indirect business opportunities. And then, yeah, getting towards the bottom, I mean, obviously there's a big one around financing and insurance. Typically, you know, your big banks and insurance companies, but providing credit and debt, you know, medium-term, long-term debt, trade finance, and then insurance, crop parametric insurance, cargo and transit, business interruption, credit risk, nationalization, confiscation, inconvertibility of funds insurance. So as I say, you know, this is what excites me about, you know, Africa over the next 20, 30 years, where I really believe that there's going to be this real growth of agri-development, and getting back to the first episode, you know, population going from just over 1 billion to 2.4 billion by 2050. We are going to see a lot of investing in farmland. But as I say to people, you know, you don't just have to think about the farmland. It's these other opportunities that will be sort of pulled along by the investment in farmland development.
And Craig,
and then there's, you know, the other, yeah.
Sorry, Craig, just to give some headline figures. Oh, turn my video on. Headline figures in the respect of South Africa that I'm learning that in the conventional, just using South Africa as an example of the level of production, that South Africa exports 4.5 million tons of fresh produce on a conventional year, exports, and then serves the internal markets with 3.5 million tons of produce. And so that's just South Africa. And as we said in the previous broadcast, the 10 fastest growing cities in the world are in Africa. So that internal market within Africa is huge, let alone on that export perspective. So yeah, there's a lot of mouths that need to be fed. Sorry, Craig, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, just to conclude that, I mean, others sort of around education. And I'm not talking necessarily about, you know, colleges and universities, but certainly those will come. And in Africa, I think there's huge opportunities to get into sort of agri-specific education, regulatory bodies, advisory bodies, R&D, etc. So, as I say, there's so many different aspects to ag investing beyond just the farmland, and the contribution to a country's GDP, including the backward and forward linkages, is significantly more than the percentage that is typically shown. And then, sort of going to the right-hand side, the new one, you know, ag tech. It's the hot one at the moment, but it's certainly getting a lot of attention by venture capital funds, etc. And that's, you know, biotechnology. I mean, we've, you know, gene editing, or I hesitate using the word genetically modified, but it is. But, you know, with the advancement of biotechnology, sequencing of crop genomes and using CRISPR. I don't know if you know what CRISPR is, but it's a gene editing tool. I think it's clustered regularly interspersed palindromic repeat sequences. But it's a technology that you can really drill into certain traits of a plant and optimize it for yield and quality and pest resilience. And so there's a lot of work being done on that. But taking where gene sequencing has progressed, I think in year 2000, if you had to sequence your genome, it would have cost, I don't know, $100 million.
Good grief.
Today it costs less than $1,000.
Wow.
So that technology has rapidly developed that it is becoming, it's demonetized. It's not a barrier. So sequencing crop genomes is not a barrier. So I think we're going to see a lot more influence of biotechnology on development of some interesting crop cultivars. Sensors, sort of proliferation of in-field sensors to provide the farmer with more real-time information to optimize his management of his farm. Robotics, lots of development happening there in terms of robotics for sort of further mechanizing the farming, particularly in the harvesting or application of fertilizer, precision type farming. Drones, satellite imaging, data made available to the farmer to sort of again optimize his fertilization and yield management. AI, artificial intelligence and machine learning, connected with the sensors, the satellite imaging, and the drones, pull together a platform of information that the farmer can have at real time to again improve his yields and quality. And throughout the value chain, not just on farm, but all the way to the shelf. Virtual reality, augmented reality, the advancements in those sectors are huge. And this could start to really democratize the learning or the education for farmers in remote areas. 3D printing. it's hard to believe, but I mean, when you speak to guys involved in 3D printing, they'll tell you that in 5 years' time, we'll be printing a steak, a juicy red, steak. I think they've already done one. But what could that disrupt in ag? It's worth taking note of. And then there's the whole blockchain technology, sort of creating these platforms that connect across the value chain, from tree to shelf, and sort of, yeah. So the ag tech space is enormous, and evolving all the time as technologies improve. So yeah, that's my sort of attempt at sort of deconstructing the sort of ag investing space beyond just the farm.
And Craig, there's so much to go out there. Just to turn it backwards. Craig, could you just turn off your screen share for a moment, because we want to see how handsome you are. With the ag tech side, I was having a conversation this week with a large apple producer in the UK, and they believe that their future is actually going to be on the tech side rather than the growing side. They're a large business. They're turning over somewhere between 40 to 60 million sterling, but their problem is they're in a commoditized sector, and comes back to the same old conversation we always end up having about margin aspirations with retailers, and so they've actually set up a tech business, and they're majoring on. We're going to have a run at this. The phrase carbon sequestration. So there's the demand. Thank you. Demand from corporates, especially, to be able to park off their carbon, but they don't know how. And you've got companies like this that are looking to set up platforms to get all apple growers globally involved in this platform, so that corporates can offset their carbon by going into the fresh produce side. And the example that they actually used with me, which was very interesting, was that in the UK we have the Ocado online delivery retailer. And when they set up to be an online delivery service. But today, actually, they're making their money, and significant money, because of the technology that they've set up, and are now farming out to other retailers on a European and a global basis. So it comes back to absolutely what you're saying. The support mechanism, the ecosystem around the fresh produce sector. There's so many different areas to go at. In your experience, do you find that the funds that are coming in, all they want to do is buy land, or are they? Did they get if it's the right phraseology to use, the ecosystem that's evolving around it? Are they sophisticated or fairly blunt in their thinking, these funds?
No. I mean, I think in that HighQuest report, and I forget the exact numbers, but I think the bulk of that $131 billion of assets under management by these fund managers, institutional investors, sits maybe, I don't want to say the percent, but it's more than 50%, but it's certainly not 100%, and that's in farmland. And then a whole lot is invested in credit and debt, downstream sort of processing, value adding, and ag tech is getting a lot of attention. So yeah, I mean, it's across this sort of spectrum. There's a lot of investment activity, that's for sure.
I think, Craig, just on the banking side, so what I'm picking up is that a lot of major banks are very concerned, skeptical about investing in Africa. So Barclays, as an example, withdrew their services a few years ago, stating corruption. Do you find within Africa, with the projects that you've handled and are handling, what's the relationship with the likes of the banks? Do the banks get this? Do the banks understand that this is a fast growing area that is going to be a benefit to one and all?
Yeah, I mean, well, in South Africa, the banks are very supportive. There is a sort of a state-owned bank called the Land Bank, which played a very important role in providing finance to the farmers. But unfortunately, that has don't know what the term is, but they've battled. And, but so they've had to pull a lot of their funding out because they've run out of their money. But the standard, sort of retail banks, commercial banks are very supportive. And you're seeing it in other parts of Africa. The problem, though, is what is the cost of that capital? In South Africa, I think our interest rate, 7.5%, our lending rate 8%. But in places, other countries, it's much higher. And sometimes, particularly with permanent crops, debt isn't an ideal sort of form of funding. As I mentioned earlier, you've got like 3 to 7 years before a tree starts to produce proper cash flow. So, and that's why I get back to the opportunity for investors to come in and put in equity, these long-term patient capital investment.
So just to give you,
funding, credit, overdraft is very different to funding long-term debt. But certainly, getting working capital is not difficult. And getting back to your corruption thing, I think Africa gets, yes, there are lots of countries, and South Africa is also, we've got a huge amount of corruption, but the corruption's everywhere. It's all over the world. And
I don't want to mention David Cameron. I think that would be. I think we need to see what happens in the UK. But yes, there's some reports coming out that the most corrupt country economically in the world is the UK, because of various reports, not just in the last couple of weeks. So yes, I think it is. Having seen Africa, I just think this is It almost as if Africa needs to employ a PR company to get over this negativity, to show that that there is a lot of good that can be done. But yes, the corruption, however you want to call it, and its various manifestations are everywhere.
Indeed.
And Craig, just to give you a bit of a crazy example, because what I'm loving about you is the way that you're very directed as to the potential. And I keep on coming back to these snippets that I'm picking up. There's a chief executive I know who works for a very large agribusiness, fresh produce business, and he keeps on getting phone calls from headhunters in New York. And they're representing New York funds who have got very excited about the agribusiness sector. And it goes back to what you said in our first broadcast, that in a recession or a pandemic, these funds are looking for a safe haven, and they've all woken up to the fact that ag business might be a safe haven. So this chap keeps on getting phoned up by these headhunters, and he went for an interview online just to get an understanding, just out of curiosity as to what these funds were looking for. And when he had the interview with them, they didn't have a clue. They just wanted to get into the sector. So if it's of interest to anyone, there's probably a number of advisory jobs out there to advise these funds in what direction to go in. But I think what's probably their naivety is that they think they've just got to buy a fresh produce business. But actually, as Craig has pointed out, the whole ecosystem is so much larger, so much more significant. Craig, do you think that just disrupts things, having these people coming in with big checkbooks, trying to buy stuff and not understanding, and probably looking to flip it 3-4 years? So they don't understand it, and they're just in it for the short term. Will that disrupt things?
No, getting back to the previous episode, I mean, the big institutional funds are there for the long term. Okay. They're looking for, I mean, these are pension funds. They're looking for sort of preservation of their capital, sort of low volatility in returns, and they get that through land value appreciation and the production, the value there. So no, I think they're in there for the long run. It's that other fund managers, like what we call the private equity funds, because they're closed and they have got time specific, 10 to 12 years, you'll see development and then looking to exit. But who do they exit to? And that could be commercial operators, other institutional funds that are looking for a long-term hold. So no, I'm not seeing, people, developing and prickling them up and quickly trying to exit. I think typically this industry is long-term, looking for long-term investment gain.
Okay, so if you're standing on a podium addressing the world fund market, whether that be the short term or the pension funds, how would you advertise? How would you promote the potential in our sectors?
Well, getting back to the first episode, it's the underlying story here around population growth, changing diets. People need to eat. People are also, we kind of connecting food and nutrition now. So we're not just thinking we're thinking more carefully about what we consume. And the story about population growth, changing diets, healthy eating leads into certain crops that have got sort of much more attractive return profiles. And then you've got the sort of investment thesis around preservation capital, lower volatility of the long run, the long term, sort of consistency in returns. And if you compare where, certainly in the US, sort of permanent crops on a scale of other asset classes, it's actually got a relatively high return, but a very low volatility over a long-term period. Yep. This is a whole nother show, but certainly the sector is an attractive, and brought up last time was 2007 after the financial recession. You saw the surge into investing in ag because these investors were looking for these alternative asset classes. You had the whole collapse of the stock exchange, drop off, high volatility, but throughout the recession, a lot of ag product classes carried on, steadily growing. People need to eat through a recession. You don't need to necessarily buy a new car or TV and so on. And then you had, through this pandemic, you're seeing the same trend. And if there's one sector that has been really resilient through the pandemic so far, it's been in the ag sector.
And one bit where I get confused with is this whole bit about the robotics, automation, AI, blockchain. I can't work out whether our sector, Craig, is sophisticated and is cutting edge, or is lagging behind other perhaps better funded areas. I get confused because I speak to suppliers who say, yeah, we're cutting edge on packaging, we're cutting edge on robotics, we'll soon be picking apples, raspberries on a fully automated basis. Then I speak to some sophisticated growers who feel that we are light years behind other sectors, and we're just not seeing that investment coming in. Where do you think we are?
Well, the ag sector has traditionally been lagging most of other sectors in its application of technology. I've worked in a number of sectors, from oil and gas, sort of mining and minerals, sort of downstream food processing, etc. And getting into the ag sector, the use of technology on farm was way sort of behind compared to those other industries. But this is sort of speeding up. There's a lot of investment going on, and you can. There's a lot of technologies coming out that you can apply on farm, but still got a long way to go. So if you take sort of the mining or oil and gas, very sophisticated sensors and instrumentation on the plant. You've got to. I mean, it's protecting your asset, but also for health and safety and process control. But on farm, very little. and through the value chain. So, but sort of low-hanging fruit for tech-savvy and developers to start to look at, what are the problems facing the ag sector? So how do I improve yield and quality? How can technology play a role? And we're seeing a spurt of research and development and sort of sensors and platforms coming out that are providing information, because that if you understand the problem, what solution can I build?
Yeah, but it's in the likes of America, it's fascinating. I was on a call the other day with the likes of AeroFarms, and I can't remember the other two, but the likes of AeroFarms has gained something like 300-400 million of funding, and they're going at it. And within America, every large town has now got a vertical farming operation that is funded, and I've used this expression so many times before. It just seems to be this gold rush, and they've all got their own ag tech operations that they're looking to deploy. So you've got so many people looking to do the same thing, and potentially the bulk of those businesses aren't going to succeed, because how many microherbs can you actually eat? But I suppose the one upside of that is going to be that tech coming in, and the people that have actually got interested in that area, and if they can be attracted to seeing how to ripen avocados on a better basis, or how to grow apples on a better basis, that intellectual horsepower is going to come through the system.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is part of the thesis for investors buying into farmland. Application of sort of technologies to improve your yield and quality. If you're doing an avocado orchard running at 10 tons a hectare, new technology, and it could be new cultivars or application of sensors to optimize nutrition, water application, pest management.
Yeah.
If you increase your yield from 10 to 50, now listen, 10 is particularly low, but if you increase it to 15 tons per hectare, the ratchet mechanism on your return back on farm is not 50% gain, because your cost per unit has come down as well. I think the sort of advancing technology is for these big investors. They're also seeing it, how this asset that they're investing in is not only just going to give them a return, but it's also going to give them a growing return by the introduction of these technologies over time, and that their asset will be worth a lot more than what they originally invested in. So it's an exciting space, and there's so much stuff happening in the ag tech space. As I say, a lot of work to be done, and going across that value chain from farm to fork, it's pretty blunt and done on upstream, and it gets more sophisticated as you go down. So if you wanted to build a blockchain across this sort of value chain, what sensors have you got upstream that you can connect to be able to do root cause analysis of a quality problem on a shelf? Very difficult at this stage.
And the investors that you get involved with, or you communicate with, you are aware of, how do they operate? Are they sort of slightly one-trick ponies that they just want to invest in land, or they want to invest in ag tech, or they want to invest in blockchain, or will they look at everything within reason? What's the general thought process of them?
No, I think investors all have their own different views on stuff, and it's all considered by what is their time frame, what is their return profile they're looking at, what is their exposure to risk, it's many considerations. So there's no one fits all model. Okay. Remember, if you had to take that diagram of mine that I showed earlier with the sort of main verticals and all these sub-sectors, and you go and map those out in terms of sort of asset heavy, asset light, return on investment, and risk profile, there's quite a big spread. So investors will be looking at, where they want to be exposed and not want to be exposed. What is their timeline? And that's why these big institutional investors are getting quite busy on the farmland, because they've got this long-term horizon. Private equity funds don't. So if you, as a private equity fund that's 10, 12 years, you close your fund on day one, and if you're lucky, you can go and plant your tree on day two, which isn't going to happen. It'll probably take a while. And then you're only, in 7 years, you're only getting into full production, or 7 years, if it's a tree nut, avocado 5, citrus sooner, and then you're having to exit in 10 years, soon thereafter. So you're not necessarily getting full value. So you're finding that the private equity funds are kind of not too heavily involved in permanent crops, but alternative.
Craig, just before we wrap up, I'd love to have a bit of an advertorial from you. How can you help people who are either looking to invest in the sector or potentially are looking for investment? How would you answer that, please?
Well, on my website, Persea.global, it highlights the services, but I do strategy work. So that could be with business owners looking to diversify or to grow their business. What should they be doing? And investors, working with investors who are looking as an entrant into the ag sector and into sub-Saharan Africa specifically. What crops should they be looking at? What countries? And building business plans around that. That's one of the services. And answering your other question is, sort of business owners looking for capital. I work with them, helping them understand where their capital can be achieved and whether it's more appropriate to use debt or equity, and and deal sourcing for investors, where they're saying, "Are we really interested in this?" Opportunity for macadamias, and we want to invest in Africa. I work with them in identifying opportunities or sourcing deals. I'm working with a client at the moment who is in the enviable space of how do they grow their business in an industry that's doubling in size in the next 5 years in terms of the volume of production. The question that they're asking is, so how do we maintain our market share in the doubling market? What do we have to put together here? And that takes capital and resources. So that's what working with them on that, and sourcing the capital, appropriate capital. Craig,
you and I are completely biased to the sector. I think it's just a fascinating sector, especially on the back of the pandemic as we work our way through it, and the double-digit rise of fresh produce sales that we're seeing in the UK. It does look to be a very good space to be in. What I think I find very enlightening today is I sometimes, I'm sure a lot of people, we just get blinkered on the big picture, the big farm, but actually the ancillary services are fascinating as well as you mentioned with an avocado orchard. If there was a mechanism and means to up the production, the upside is fantastic. So there's so many
other industries that support that.
Yeah,
there's multiple industries that if you excited about the future of ag, you don't just have to be thinking about investing in the farm.
Yeah.
But as the ag sector grows, there's all these ancillary, what we call backward and forward linkages that are on that flywheel.
Yeah. Fascinating. Craig, thank you very, very much for your time. It's it's going to be a very interesting couple of years. So if you're looking to get involved in this sector, or perhaps you're looking to source investment, especially within the likes of the Africa areas, you got to contact Craig. Craig, what's your website again, please?
Persea.global.
Fantastic, and we'll post it all up everywhere. Craig, you keep well, and we didn't do the weather. Just quickly before we wrap up, we were sort of coming into our spring summer finally. Here, I presume it's too cold for you in South Africa now, is it?
Yeah, funny enough, today is pretty chilly. But yeah, the week we had over 30 degrees. And funny enough, I see on the west coast, I don't know if I think you've been to the west coast of South Africa, sort of north of Cape Town. There's a town, Vredendal, which on Wednesday had a record high. Wow. Record ever recorded temperature of, take a wild guess. And this is in sort of towards the end of April, we're talking, sort of 42.7 degrees.
Well, this way. Well, if you ever want to do a house swap, Craig, on the basis of our rubbish weather and you're too hot, come on, let's do it. Well, let's migrate both ways one day.
Yeah, anytime.
Excellent. Craig, thank you very much. And we'll see you next month. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Cheers. Cheers, everyone.
Bye. Bye.